Monday morning at Eva's boutique on Fifth Avenue began with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the muffled click of heels on the marble floor. Evelyn Turnblad scrutinized the new display of merchandise, occasionally adjusting her perfectly styled blonde hair. Her fingers, adorned with a single ring, a thin platinum band with a small diamond, glided over the silk blouses. "Janet, this is unacceptable." Eva stopped at the scarf stand. "The spring collection should create a light mood. And what you have here, a funeral home. Remove all the dark shades and replace them with pastels." The young saleswoman, nervously fingering the hem of her uniform skirt, rushed to carry out the instruction. Eva watched her go and sighed almost imperceptibly. The girl was hard-working but had no sense of style. She would either have to be trained or replaced. "Miss Rodriguez, come see me in 5 minutes with the sales report," she called to the manager, a stately woman in a strict suit as she passed by. In her office, decorated in light colors with rare accents of old gold, Eva first checked her mail. Among the business letters was a personal one from her old friend Carol with an invitation to a charity evening. Eva grimaced. Lately, such events had only annoyed her. She found the sympathetic glances of her female acquaintances particularly tiresome when she appeared without her husband. By the time Miss Rodriguez placed the folder with the reports on the table, Eva had already sketched out a development plan for the next quarter. "Have a seat, Maria," Eva said, pointing to a chair. "Tell me how things are going with the new collection." While the manager reported on sales, Eva carefully studied the figures. The business was thriving. They had opened 2 more boutiques in the last year and profits were steadily growing. Eva had built this business from scratch, investing not only money but also her heart and soul into every detail. "Good, but the return rate is still a bit high," she remarked, making notes in her notebook. "Work with the staff on sizing and update the customer service training." The day flew by in the usual hustle and bustle. Eva returned home late after dark. The spacious house in the suburbs was quiet. Lloyd was late again. It had become a regular occurrence lately. Eva took off her high-heeled shoes and went into the kitchen. The immaculately clean room sparkled. The housekeeper, Martha, had done an excellent job as always. A note in familiar, careless handwriting lay on the table. "Important meeting with clients. We'll be late." Eva mechanically put the kettle on. They used to often have dinner together and discuss the day. Now those evenings seemed like a distant memory. Something had changed in their relationship. When had it started? Perhaps when her second boutique began to generate significant profits and Lloyd was stuck in a middle management position? They had met 15 years ago at the opening of an art gallery. Lloyd had impressed her with his sharp mind and ambition. Tall, fit, with attentive brown eyes and a charming smile, he stood out from the other men. She especially remembered how enthusiastically he talked about his plans to build a construction empire. The first years of marriage were happy. Lloyd supported her idea of opening her own boutique and helped her with the business plan. And then something broke. His career stalled while hers took off. He smiled less, drank more, stayed late at work more often. Eva took a bottle of white wine out of the refrigerator. Pouring herself a glass, she went into her home office. The habit of checking her finances at the end of the day had become second nature since she started her business. Opening her laptop, she began to look through her account statements. Something caught her eye. A large transfer made 3 days ago. The amount was substantial, $250,000. She frowned, trying to remember what the money could have been spent on. No major purchases for the boutiques were planned. There were no personal expenses of that magnitude either. At that moment, the front door slammed shut. She heard Lloyd's heavy footsteps. "Eva, are you home?" His voice sounded a little tense. "In my office," she replied, without taking her eyes off the screen. Lloyd appeared in the doorway. He smelled faintly of alcohol and some unfamiliar perfume. His tie was loosened carelessly, and there was a sauce stain on his shirt. "How was the meeting?" Eva asked, looking closely at her husband. "Fine. Just the usual negotiations." He shrugged and looked away. "What are you doing?" "Checking the accounts." "Honey, do you know where the $250,000 went last week?" Lloyd froze for a moment, almost imperceptibly, but Eva caught this hesitation. "Oh, that. Remember I told you about the investment project? A profitable investment in real estate. Everything's been arranged. I'll show you the documents later," he said quickly, avoiding her gaze. "Okay, I'll wait," Eva replied calmly. Lloyd hastily excused himself, citing fatigue. Eva thoughtfully twirled her wine glass in her hands. Something was definitely wrong. Her husband had never been interested in investments, preferring to stay away from financial matters. The next morning, as she gathered her husband's scattered clothes, she found a crumpled check in his jacket pocket. Marco's restaurant was an expensive place in the city center. The date was the night before last. The time was 7 in the evening. Dinner for two, a bottle of expensive wine. That evening, Lloyd said he had a meeting with contractors. Eva carefully placed the check in her desk drawer. It was too early to jump to conclusions, but she always trusted her intuition, and her intuition was screaming that a dangerous crack had appeared in her perfectly ordered life. Sunday morning was cloudy. Eva sat at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly stirring her cold coffee. Lloyd had left for an important meeting with contractors at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning. She caught her reflection in the shiny coffee maker and noticed how her features had sharpened over the past week. Going upstairs, she stopped at her husband's study door. She had never allowed herself to rummage through his things before. It seemed unworthy of their relationship. But now, something had broken in the system of trust they had built over 15 years. Lloyd's office had always been the epitome of chaos, unlike her perfectly organized workspace. Folders with documents were piled up everywhere, sticky notes were scattered across the desk, and crumpled sheets of paper protruded from the wastebasket. Eva methodically began to look through the papers: electricity bills, old contracts, phone records. Suddenly, a folded sheet slipped out of one of the folders. It was a draft purchase agreement. A house in a prestigious neighborhood, 3 bedrooms, a quarter-acre lot. The price, $400,000. The down payment was $250,000, exactly the amount that had disappeared from her account. Eva closed her eyes, remembering the conversation 3 weeks ago. Lloyd had been unusually excited, talking about an amazing opportunity to invest in real estate. "It's a great chance, honey," he had insisted, pacing around the bedroom. "The house is in great condition, and the neighborhood is up and coming. The price will double in a couple of years." "Why the rush?" she had asked. "Other buyers are ready to put down a deposit. We have to act fast." She agreed, believing his enthusiasm. For the first time in a long time, the old sparkle returned to his eyes. Returning to the document, Eva carefully studied the details. The buyer was a John Smith, too common a name to be real. The seller was a real estate company called Premier Estates. The contact person was listed as Marilyn Quart. Eva took out her phone and dialed her bank manager's number. Alex had worked with her for over 10 years and was always ready to help. "Mrs. Turnblad, good to hear from you." His voice sounded unusually wary. "Alex, I need information about a recent transfer, $250,000, last Wednesday." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Yes, I remember that transaction. Mr. Turnblad came to the bank himself. Where did the money go?" "To the Premier Estates account. To be honest, I wanted to call you. This isn't a typical transaction for you." "Why didn't you call?" "Mr. Turnblad provided a power of attorney from you, very convincing." Eva felt a chill run down her spine. A power of attorney. Lloyd had access to her signature on business documents. "Thank you, Alex. Please send me all the details of this transaction." She put down the phone and picked up the documents again. In the bottom drawer of her desk, she found a business card for a private detective agency. Eva remembered the owner, Raymond Price, who had once helped her screen candidates for a boutique manager position. Her fingers trembled as she dialed the number. The ringing seemed to last forever. Price Agency. "Mr. Price, this is Evelyn Turnblad. Do you remember me?" "Of course, Mrs. Turnblad. How can I help you?" "I need information about Premier Estates, specifically about their employee, Marilyn Quart." "What exactly are you interested in?" "Everything. Absolutely everything." After finishing the call, Eva slowly descended to the first floor. Their wedding photo still hung in the living room, her in a white dress, Lloyd in a formal suit. They were so young, so happy. Her phone vibrated, a message from her husband. "I'll be late. Don't wait up for dinner." Eva glanced at the clock. It was 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. I wonder what contractors are working at this time of day. She opened her laptop and typed the address from the contract into the search engine. The house was really beautiful. 2 stories, colonial style, with a well-kept garden. It was the kind of house they had dreamed of when they first started their family. Only now, it seemed, Lloyd had decided to fulfill that dream with someone else. Suddenly, Eva caught herself feeling strange. She felt neither anger nor despair, only cold, calculating curiosity. It was as if she were watching a particularly interesting business case unfold. The doorbell rang. The courier had delivered a folder from Alex. Looking through the bank documents, Eva noted how professionally the operation had been carried out. Everything was clean, difficult to find fault with. If she hadn't known her finances down to the last cent, she might not have noticed. Her phone vibrated again. "Price. The first results will be in tomorrow morning. Shall we meet at your office?" "Yes, at 9, she typed a short reply. Eva went to the bar and poured herself a scotch, a habit she had picked up from her father. He always said, "When you start a big game, you have to be as clear-headed as possible, but a sip of good whiskey helps you collect your thoughts." She looked at the light through the amber liquid. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of shared life, plans, hopes, and all of it ruined for, what? A young real estate agent and a house in the suburbs? "Well, dear," she whispered, raising her glass, "you chose this game. Let's see who's better at it." Rain began to fall outside, large drops drumming against the glass. Somewhere out there in this city, her husband was meeting his mistress, making plans with her for their joint money, perhaps laughing at his naive wife. Eva smiled, calmly, almost tenderly. She had a reputation as a tough but fair boss. Now it was time to show how tough she could be when it came to betrayal. "Your husband has a very predictable schedule." Raymond Price laid out the photos on Eva's desk. It was early morning. The first rays of sun were just beginning to peek through the blinds. Every Tuesday and Thursday he claims to be working late, but in reality he's meeting Miss Quart at the Blue Oyster, a small, inconspicuous restaurant in the South End. On Sundays, they meet at his house. Eva picked up one of the photos. Lloyd was helping Marilyn out of a silver Lexus. His hand was on her waist and she was tossing back her long red hair. In another photo, they were sitting in the restaurant. Lloyd was talking animatedly, and Marilyn was laughing, her head thrown back. "What did you find out about Miss Quart?" 29 years old. She's been working at Premier Estates for 5 years. Before that, she worked at 3 real estate agencies. She left all of them in a scandal, suspected of fraud, but nothing could be proven. She's from Idaho, from a poor family. Her father was an alcoholic, her mother worked as a waitress. She attended a local college but didn't graduate. She came to New York 8 years ago. And John Smith? An interesting character. He formally exists. He has documents, a social security number. But there is no person with that information. A professionally created, fictitious identity. Eva tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. I need to see them with my own eyes. I wouldn't advise it. It's too risky. I know what I'm doing. On Tuesday evening, Eva sat at a table in the Blue Oyster, hidden by the high back of her chair. A wig with short dark hair and glasses changed her appearance enough that she wouldn't be recognized. Lloyd and Marilyn showed up at 7. He looked younger, more enthusiastic. She hadn't seen him like that in years. Marilyn was dressed expensively but tastelessly, in a dress that was too bright and too much jewelry. Everything is going according to plan, her husband's voice reached her. Eva doesn't suspect a thing. She's completely absorbed in her business. Are you sure? She's obsessed with controlling the finances. Trust me, I know my wife. She only sees what she wants to see. Marilyn lowered her voice. When can we start living there? Soon, baby. Just a few more formalities to take care of. Then I'll file for divorce and we'll be free. Eva took a sip of wine. So, divorce, after 15 years of marriage. She remembered the first years of their life together. Lloyd was working as a junior manager at a construction company. He was very promising and everyone predicted a bright future for him. But then, 7 years ago, that ill-fated project happened. She remembered how her husband came home more and more depressed. The project he was in charge of had failed. The contractor missed the deadline and the budget was exceeded by half. Lloyd wasn't fired, but he didn't get any more raises. He was stuck in a middle management position, watching younger colleagues pass him by on the career ladder. Meanwhile, she was developing her business. She opened a second boutique, then a third. She began appearing at social events and her name appeared in fashion magazines. Lloyd started drinking. Not heavily, not to the point of causing scandals, just a glass or two of whiskey every evening. And more often he started talking about how he could have achieved more if he had been given a chance. Baby, you're going to be the queen of this house, her husband's voice brought her back to reality. I've thought it all through. After the divorce, half of Eva's business will be mine. We'll sell her share and we'll have enough money to live comfortably. Marilyn stroked his hand. You're my smart boy. Eva suppressed the urge to laugh. Poor, naive Lloyd. Did he really believe he could get half of her business? After all, the documents were drawn up in her maiden name and the prenuptial agreement was drafted by the best lawyers in town? The next day, she went to see the house. She parked on a neighboring street and walked over. It was a beautiful place, quiet and green. The house looked exactly like the photos. White walls, a tiled roof, a well-kept lawn. She imagined Lloyd and Marilyn planning their happy life here, choosing furniture, discussing curtain colors, dreaming about the future, all with her money, earned through years of hard work. Excuse me, are you looking for something? An elderly woman with a dog stopped beside her. Just looking around the neighborhood. I'm thinking of moving here. Oh, it's wonderful here. You know, that house was recently bought by such a lovely young couple. I think they just got married. Really? How interesting. Back home, Eva opened her laptop and began writing a letter to her lawyer. It was time to take action. Here's the complete file on Miss Quart. Raymond Price placed a heavy folder on the table. I think you'll find it interesting. Eva opened the folder. The first thing that caught her eye was a school photo of Marilyn, a thin, red-haired teenage girl in worn-out clothes. Her eyes were downcast, her lips pressed together. Marilyn Jane Quart, born in Boise, Idaho. Father, Frank Quart, mechanic, died in a drunken brawl when she was 14. Mother, Doris Quart, worked as a waitress in several diners. Currently on welfare, lives in a trailer park. Eva turned the page. School records, grades. Studied well, especially math and economics. Teachers noted a sharp mind and a tendency to manipulate, was accidentally involved in a story about stolen exam papers, but nothing could be proven. Her first experience with fraud. It looks like it. In college, history repeated itself. Document forgery, selling test answers. Again, everything was hushed up. She knows how to get out of trouble. Next were photos of Marilyn with different men. Her exes? Eva asked. Her sponsors, Price smirked. Each one helped her climb the ladder. The car dealership owner paid for her move to New York. The bank clerk helped her get her first job at a real estate agency. The CFO got her a job at Premier Estates. And then she met my husband. Exactly, but she didn't dump her previous patron. A certain James Harris, vice president of a construction company, still pays for her apartment. Eva tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. A plan began to form in her head. The next day, having changed her appearance, she entered the Premier Estates office. I'd like to speak to Miss Court. I'm looking for a house in the suburbs. Marilyn fluttered out of her office, bright, energetic, confident. An expensive suit accentuated her slender figure. How can I help you? I'm looking for something special. My budget is around $1 million. A predatory gleam flashed in Marilyn's eyes. I have several excellent options. Please have a seat. For the next hour, Eva watched her rival. Marilyn was good. She flattered skillfully, created the illusion of a trusting relationship, and deftly steered the conversation toward investments. How about investing in promising real estate? I have a few interesting schemes. What kind? Well, for example, you could buy a house through a front man, wait a while, and sell it at a substantial profit. It's completely legal. You just need to know a few things. That evening, Eva sat at her husband's computer. She had known his passwords for a long time. He had never changed the combination of their anniversary and the name of their dog, who had died 5 years ago. The mailbox turned out to be a real treasure trove. Hundreds of letters from Marilyn, photos, plans for the future. Honey, as soon as everything is settled with your wife, we will live our dream. I'm so tired of hiding. You deserve more than to be in the shadow of your wife. The correspondence about the house was particularly interesting. Marilyn had organized the whole scheme. A front man, fake documents, an inflated price. Part of the money was to be returned through dummy accounts. Your wife won't even notice the money is missing. She's too busy with her rags, Marilyn wrote. And when she does, it'll be too late. Eva saved all the correspondence on a flash drive. Then she opened a new document and began to draw up a plan. Point 1. Check all of Marilyn's connections in the real estate business. Point 2. Find other clients who had been cheated. Point 3. Contact James Harris. Are you still awake? Lloyd's voice made her jump. He was standing in the doorway, swaying slightly, clearly after a meeting with his mistress. Working, she smiled. You know me, always immersed in my business. Yes, I know, he grimaced. Good night. Good night, dear, Eva replied, watching him leave. Very soon you'll have plenty of reasons for sleepless nights. So, let's begin the operation. Eva glanced around at the people gathered in her office. It was early Saturday morning and the empty office was quiet. Marcus Stein, her lawyer, tapped his pen on the table. Next to him sat Sarah Hendricks, a financial auditor with a reputation as a bulldog. In the corner sat the silent Kevin Chang, a computer security specialist. Raymond Price completed the circle. Gentlemen, I chose you because each of you is the best in your field, and because I trust each of you. Marcus cleared his throat. Eva, I've reviewed the documents. The fictitious identity of John Smith, the forgery of your signature on the power of attorney, the illegal use of corporate funds. There are at least 3 criminal charges here. Don't rush into a criminal case. Eva shook her head. I want a more subtle solution. Sarah opened her laptop. I traced the money. They used a classic money laundering scheme through shell companies. Some of the funds went back to Marilyn Quartz's personal account. But the most interesting thing is that this isn't the first transaction of this kind. Over the past 2 years, she's pulled off at least 5 similar deals. Kevin? Eva turned to the IT specialist. I got access to the Premier Estate server. There's a whole database of similar transactions. Plus, Miss Quartz's personal correspondence with various interested parties, including some very influential people in the real estate industry. Excellent. Raymond? The detective placed several photographs on the table. I've set up surveillance on the house. They're there 3 or 4 times a week, usually during the day when you're at work. The neighbors already consider them a couple. Eva stood up and walked over to the window. Below, the city was waking up, people rushing about their business. Somewhere out there was Lloyd, perhaps already meeting Marilyn for their traditional Saturday breakfast. Here's what we're going to do, she said, turning to her team. Sarah, prepare a full audit of all Premier Estates transactions over the past 3 years. I'm particularly interested in those 5 cases with the fake buyers. I'm already on it. Marcus, find those defrauded clients. Suggest they join a class action lawsuit against the agency, but don't file anything yet. Keep it as a trump card. What about your husband? Lloyd can wait. Let's deal with Miss Quartz first, Eva smiled. Kevin, what compromising material is there in her correspondence? Lots of interesting stuff. For example, correspondence with James Harris. He's married, by the way, and there's evidence that she blackmailed him. Excellent. Prepare a dossier, but no names yet, just facts and evidence. Raymond, she turned to the detective. I need information on all her contacts in the real estate business, especially those she's cheated or set up. We already have a few people who are willing to talk. Excellent. Eva returned to the table. Now for the most important part. No one must know about our work. I will continue to play the role of the unsuspecting wife. I will be even more attentive and caring than usual. Why? Marcus was surprised. Because overconfidence is their main weakness. The more confident they feel, the more mistakes they'll make. That evening, Eva prepared dinner, Lloyd's favorite roast. She hummed as she set the table and arranged the candles. When her husband came home, she greeted him with a smile. You seem different today, he remarked, sniffing the aroma of the roast. I just missed you. You've been working so much lately. Over dinner, she asked him about his work and listened attentively to his stories about difficult clients. She even pretended to believe his story about a business meeting on Sunday. Later, lying in bed, Eva looked over her schedule for the coming week. Monday, meeting with Marilyn's former clients. Tuesday, preparing documents for the Real Estate Licensing Commission. Wednesday, talking to James Harris's wife. How's that investment project going? She asked casually. Lloyd flinched. Oh, everything's going according to plan. Don't worry about it. I'm not worried, dear. I trust you completely. In the darkness, she smiled when she heard him breathe a sigh of relief. Poor, naive Lloyd. He really believed he could fool her, that all these years she had been just a busy, inattentive wife, obsessed with her business. He had forgotten how she had built that business. He had forgotten that behind each of her successes was not only hard work, but also the ability to calculate her moves, see through people, and wait for the right moment to strike. Well, he would soon remember. In the meantime, let him enjoy his illusion of happiness with Marilyn. Let them make plans in their new house, bought with her money. Time was on her side. Every day, her team gathered more information, prepared documents, and built a network of deceived and angry people. And she continued to smile, cook dinner, and pretend she didn't notice anything. The perfect wife, the perfect victim. Until the time came. The letters have been sent, Kevin handed Eve the flash drive. Anonymously through different servers. No one will be able to trace the source. Copies of the sent messages appeared on the laptop screen. The 10 largest real estate agencies in the city had received detailed files on Maryland court schemes, dates, amounts, transaction details, all without mentioning real names, but with enough details for professionals to understand the essence. And this is the most interesting part. Kevin opened another file. Information about the deal she's working on right now. The sale of a building in the business center. The commission is about $300,000. Eva looked through the documents. Another scam, an inflated price, a fake buyer, kickbacks. Send this directly to the buyer, anonymously, of course. 3 days later, Raymond reported the first results. The deal fell through. The client backed out at the last minute. Marilyn lost a large commission and her reputation with the agency's management. Then the complaints started coming in. Former clients, emboldened by anonymous letters, filed complaints one after another. Some complained about the concealment of information about problems with the property, others about outright price fraud. Mr. Harrington from the Real Estate Licensing Commission has requested an audit of all of Miss Quart's transactions over the past year, Marcus reported. It looks like one of the aggrieved clients got the right people involved. Eva watched as Marilyn's house of cards came crashing down. Every evening, Lloyd came home looking increasingly gloomy and increasingly drunk. One evening, she overheard them arguing on the phone. Lloyd was shouting into the receiver, forgetting to be discreet. "What do you mean? It's all gone. You said you had everything under control." "I don't give a damn about your reputation. What about our plans, the house? What are we going to do about the loan?" "You deal with it yourself. You got me into this." Eva stirred the pasta sauce, pretending not to hear her husband shouting from the study. When he came down to dinner, his hands were shaking noticeably. "Is everything okay, dear?" she asked with concern in her voice. "Yes, just problems at work." "Is there anything I can do to help?" "No," he almost shouted. Then he pulled himself together. "No, honey, I'll take care of it." The next day, Sarah brought news from Premier Estates. Marilyn had been called in to see management. Her deals were being audited, and clients were demanding explanations. "She's in a panic," Raymond reported. "She's been running around all day between the bank, the agency, and the lawyers. She's been trying to cover up the scandal with the last deal, but to no avail." Eva reserved a table at the Blue Oyster, the restaurant where Lloyd and Marilyn liked to meet. She sat down at her usual table, hidden by the high back of the chair. They appeared an hour later. Both were agitated and nervous. Marilyn looked haggard, her usually flawless makeup smudged. "We have to sell the house," Eva heard her husband's mistress say. "Now, before it gets worse." "Are you out of your mind? What about our plans?" "What plans, Lloyd? Don't you understand? I could lose my license. All my deals are being investigated." "So what? What does that have to do with our house?" "It's not our house. It's part of a scheme that's about to be exposed." "Quiet," Lloyd looked around fearfully. "Someone might hear us." "I don't care. I need money to cover up the scandal. Otherwise, everything is lost. The house, my career, and our love?" Lloyd's voice sounded bitter. Marilyn laughed, evil, hysterical laughter. "Love? You thought it was love? God, you're so naive." Eva finished her wine and quietly left the restaurant. She got into her car and took out her phone. "Marcus, it's time to move on to the second stage. Get the documents ready for the licensing commission and contact the tax office. I have some interesting information for them." At home, Lloyd drank himself into a stupor. Eva covered him with a blanket on the sofa and placed a glass of water and some aspirin next to him. "Sleep, dear," she whispered. "Tomorrow will be a new day, and new surprises." Braidwell Construction occupied 2 floors in a glass business center. Eva parked across the street, watching Lloyd hurry into the building. Lately, he had been arriving before everyone else, trying to prove his indispensability. The letter has been sent, Kevin reported on the phone. The CEO will receive it in 10 minutes. The envelope, sent from an anonymous address, contained documents about Lloyd's latest project. Carefully selected figures showed systematic errors in calculations, strange coincidences in the selection of contractors, and inexplicable overestimates. "Are you sure we should do this?" Marcus asked during the morning meeting. "This could completely ruin his career." "He ruined his own career when he decided to steal my money," Eva replied. "I'm just helping the truth come out." By lunchtime, a scandal had erupted in the company. An important contract that Lloyd had been working on turned out to contain serious errors. The contractor was threatening legal action. "Turnblad, what the hell?" His boss's voice echoed throughout the floor. "How could you miss such obvious discrepancies?" I checked all the numbers." He checked them. "Then why is the estimate 30% too high? Why does the contract include specifications that don't exist?" That evening, Lloyd came home devastated. He went straight to the bar and poured himself a whiskey. "Is something wrong?" Eva asked solicitously, even though she knew the answer. "Nothing," he muttered, downing his glass. "Just a rough day." The next week, things only got worse. Errors were found in Lloyd's other projects as well. Every day brought new problems. Deadlines were missed. Strange inconsistencies appeared in documents. "Turnblad, this is your last warning," the director announced after another failure. "One more mistake and you're fired." Meanwhile, Marilyn, losing clients and her reputation, was becoming increasingly demanding. Eva intercepted their messages. "I need money. Urgently." "Where am I supposed to get it? I have problems of my own." "Find a way. Sell something, borrow, steal from your wife." One morning, Eva accidentally found a bank statement, a late payment on a home loan. Lloyd had hidden the notices, but the money had to come from somewhere. "Honey, are you sure everything's okay?" she asked at dinner. "You seem tense lately." "Everything's fine," he said, not even looking up from his plate. He smelled of whiskey, even though it was only Tuesday. In the evening, the phone rang. Eva heard her husband arguing with Marilyn in his study. "I can't take out another loan. I'm already at my limit." "Then sell your share of the house." "You know that's impossible. It's all registered to a front man. Think of something. Otherwise, we're both finished." After that conversation, Lloyd stayed up late in his study. Eva could hear him muttering something as he counted numbers. In the morning, she found him asleep at his desk with an empty bottle next to him. On Friday, a letter arrived from the bank, the second overdue payment on the house. And on Monday, disaster struck at Lloyd's work. A crucial contract was lost due to accidentally mixed-up documents. "Pack your things," said the director dryly. "You're fired." That evening, Eva found her husband in a bar near their home. He was sitting there staring into an empty glass. "Lloyd? What happened?" "I lost my job," he replied hollowly. "It's all over." "But why? How did this happen?" He smiled bitterly. "You wouldn't understand. You've always been successful, and I'm a failure." Eva put her hand on his shoulder. "Let's go home. Everything will be fine." "Fine?" He shook his head. "No, honey. Nothing will be fine now." He was right. But he had no idea how right he was. The morning at the Blue Oyster was unusually quiet. Lloyd nervously twirled a cup of cold coffee in his hands while Marilyn listed their problems. "This can't be a coincidence," she lowered her voice. "First, the problems with my license, then your dismissal. Someone is after us." "You think it's one of your former clients?" "No, it's too professional, methodical. It's as if someone knows all our weak spots." Lloyd suddenly turned pale. "You mean Eva? Your wife? Don't be ridiculous. She's completely absorbed in her business. When would she have time to follow us?" But the seed of doubt had already begun to gnaw at both of them. They began to notice details that had previously seemed insignificant. How Ava always happened to be home on the evenings when they planned to meet. How she had started asking more questions about work, plans, finances. Yesterday she asked about the restaurant where we usually meet, Lloyd admitted. Just in passing. She said someone recommended it. Marilyn bit her lip. And last week she came to our agency. I'm sure it was her, wearing a dark wig and glasses. It can't be. She wouldn't. Why? Because she's too busy or too stupid? You told me yourself how she built her business. Maybe we underestimated her? Lloyd began to avoid going home. He stayed out late at bars and spent the night at friends' houses. When he did come home, he flinched at every glance his wife gave him, at every innocent question she asked. Eva continued to play her role flawlessly. She cooked his favorite meals, asked about his plans for the future, offered to help him find a new job. Maybe you should take a break, she said at dinner. Go somewhere, clear your head. We have savings. At the word savings, Lloyd choked on his wine. Meanwhile, Marilyn was looking for a way out. She tried to contact old acquaintances and offered her services as a private real estate consultant, but her reputation was already hopelessly ruined. We have to sell the house, she said at their next meeting, before things get worse. But how? Everything is registered under a front man, and the bank is already asking about the overdue payments. Find a way. Maybe we should talk to Eva? Confess everything? Lloyd turned pale. Are you crazy? If she finds out, what if she already knows? That night, Lloyd had a particularly hard time falling asleep. He lay there listening to his wife's breathing. She seemed so calm, so peaceful. At breakfast, Eva casually remarked, "You know, I was walking past that new house in the suburbs, the one you were looking at for investment. Nice area." Lloyd dropped his fork. "By the way," she continued in the same tone, "I heard that Premier Estates is having some problems with its license. I hope that won't affect your investment." "No. What are you? Everything's under control." "Really? I'm so glad." She smiled and kissed him on the cheek. "You know how much I trust your business sense." Something flashed in her eyes. Understanding. A threat? Lloyd couldn't tell for sure, but for the first time in their marriage he felt truly afraid. That evening, he called Marilyn. "You were right, she knows, and it looks like she's known for a long time. What should we do?" "I don't know, but I feel like this is just the beginning." They had no idea how right they were. Ava sat in her office reviewing the detective's latest report and preparing her next move. It was time to move from hints to open confrontation. The annual charity ball of the Realtors Association was being held at the plaza. Eva had bought a new dress especially for the occasion, dark blue silk that accentuated her figure, and a sapphire necklace, a gift from her husband on their 10th wedding anniversary, completed the look. "Are you going?" she asked Lloyd. "You usually find these events boring." "Yes, I think it's worth showing up," he said, nervously adjusting his tie. "It's important to maintain connections right now." Eva knew the real reason. Marilyn was supposed to be there too. It was her last attempt to save her reputation in the professional community. The ballroom of the plaza sparkled with crystal chandeliers. Representatives of the city's largest real estate agencies had gathered to discuss charitable projects and, of course, gossip. Marilyn arrived later, wearing a red dress that was too revealing. Eva noticed how Lloyd struggled to keep his eyes off her. "Here's our main benefactor." James Harris, president of the association, greeted Eva. "Let me introduce you to the members of the ethics committee." Eva smiled sweetly and shook hands. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Marilyn trying to strike up conversations with potential clients who politely walked away. And then it began. "Attention, please." Harris's voice boomed throughout the hall. "The ethics committee has an important announcement. Marilyn froze with a glass of champagne in her hand. Lloyd turned pale. As a result of a thorough investigation, systematic violations of professional ethics and the law have been identified. Harris unfolded the papers. Miss Marilyn Court, please come forward. Eva watched as her husband's mistress slowly walked across the room. The red dress now seemed garishly vulgar. The commission has decided to revoke your license immediately. Furthermore, the case has been referred to the prosecutor's office. A whisper ran through the room. Marilyn staggered. This is a mistake. I can explain everything. I'm afraid not, Harris was adamant. We have all the evidence. Fictitious transactions, front men, document fraud. Lloyd moved toward the exit, but Ava intercepted him. Leaving already, dear? The best is yet to come. You? He stared at her face. It's you? Of course, dear. Who else? She spoke quietly, only for him to hear. Did you think I wouldn't find out about the house? About my stolen money? Eva, I can explain. Not here, she smiled at those around her. We'll talk at home. Marilyn tried to argue with the commission, but no one was listening to her anymore. Harris read out a list of violations, including the very same deal with the house. John Smith? Eva sneered. Seriously? You could have come up with something more original. Lloyd rushed for the exit. Eva calmly followed him. In the hall, she caught up with her husband. You know what's funny? I could have stopped you at any moment, but I wanted to see how far you would go. Why? Why did you do that? Publicity is the best defense against fraudsters, she said, straightening his crooked tie. Now everyone knows who Marilyn Court is and who you are. At that moment, Marilyn ran out of the hall, smearing mascara across her cheeks. Lloyd, they know everything. About the house, about the schemes, about... She froze when she saw Eva. Good evening, Miss Court. Eva smiled. I'm sorry I ruined your plans for a happy life in my house. Marilyn looked at Lloyd. She knew? All this time? Oh, yes. Eva took out her lipstick and calmly touched up her lips. And you know what? It was actually quite amusing watching your pathetic attempts to deceive me. Lloyd grabbed Marilyn's arm. We have to get out of here, now! Run! Run! Eva waved after them. Just remember, this isn't over. I'm just getting started. She watched them hurry out of the hotel. Two hunted men who had lost everything, their reputation, their jobs, their future. Mrs. Turnblad? Harris approached her. What a scandal. But why today? Because revenge is a dish best served cold, she said, raising her glass of champagne. To justice? Lloyd didn't come home that night. Eva lay in their marital bed looking through messages from her team. Everything was going according to plan. Now that the masks were off, it was time to move on to the final phase. We have something interesting. Marilyn's voice sounded confident on the phone. A week had passed since the scandal at the plaza, and the lovers had finally decided to counterattack. Really? Eva leaned back in her office chair. What is it? Documents. About how you built your business. Very informative reading. Let's meet, Eva smiled. All three of us, at the Blue Oyster, in an hour. The restaurant was practically empty. It was a weekday at 3 in the afternoon. Lloyd and Marilyn were already waiting at a table in the back. Both looked haggard, but there was a feverish gleam in their eyes. So? Eva sat down opposite, placing her favorite Hermes handbag on the table. Marilyn triumphantly laid out a folder. Remember your first boutique, and how quickly you got all the permits, and the construction of the shopping center in 2009? Of course I remember. Eva didn't even glance at the documents. Go on. Bribes to officials, falsified tax returns, kickbacks for rent. Lloyd leaned forward. If this gets to the press... If... Eva raised an eyebrow gracefully. Why haven't you made these revelations public yet? We're willing to negotiate. Marilyn tried to sound confident, but her voice trembled. You withdraw all complaints, return my license. And the money, Lloyd interjected. Compensation for moral damages. Eva laughed, lightly, sincerely. God, do you really think you found something worthwhile? She opened her purse and took out her folder, which was much thinner than theirs. Here's the audit report from 2 years ago. All my transactions are clean. All permits were obtained legally, and your documents are cheap forgeries. But Marilyn turned pale. Do you know what your biggest mistake was? Ava poured herself some water. You decided that I was just like you, that I built my business through deception and fraud, but I just worked. 15 years of hard, honest work. You're lying, Lloyd hissed. I know you're no saint. Oh, I'm no saint, she smiled. I'm just smarter than you, and I never leave any traces. Eva stood up. Thanks for meeting with me. It was fun. Wait, Marilyn jumped up. What about the deal? What deal? You tried to blackmail me with forgeries. Does that look like a bargaining position to you? At the door, she turned around. By the way, I suggest you check your accounts and your house documents. You might be in for a few surprises. Leaving the restaurant, Eva dialed a number. Marcus? They took the bait. Start the bankruptcy proceedings. That evening, she watched the surveillance footage from the restaurant. The lovers sat at the table for a long time, feverishly discussing something. They thought they had found her weak spot, that they finally had the upper hand. Poor, naive children. They didn't even realize that they had trapped themselves, that their blackmail attempt was the final nail in their coffin. Eva opened her laptop and checked her email. A confirmation had arrived from the tax office. An unscheduled audit of all Premier Estates transactions would begin tomorrow. The bank had notified her of the start of foreclosure proceedings on her home loan. Do you think we're stupid? Came a message from Lloyd. She didn't bother to reply. Why bother? Let them think they've won. Let them celebrate their illusory triumph. In a week, they'll realize how badly they've been mistaken. But it will be too late. Eva poured herself a glass of wine and walked over to the window. Somewhere out there in the city, two people were making plans for their revenge. They had no idea that their every move, every decision had been calculated in advance. Here's to you, lovebirds, she whispered, raising her glass. Enjoy your last days of freedom. The final part of the plan was already in motion, and it was going to be beautiful. She smiled, remembering the frightened faces of the lovers. They didn't yet realize that public disgrace was only the beginning, that in 15 years of marriage she had studied all her husband's weaknesses, that her revenge would be long and sophisticated. She had the whole night ahead of her to plan her next move. It's starting, Marcus said, placing a stack of documents on Eva's desk. The first lawsuits are already in court. 5 of Marilyn's former clients have filed claims of fraud. Eva looked through the papers. The amounts claimed were impressive, ranging from $100,000 to $500,000. And here's the interesting part. The lawyer took out a separate folder. The tax authorities have discovered unreported income for the last 3 years, tax evasion, concealment of profits. Are their accounts frozen? Every single one, including Marilyn's secret account in the Cayman Islands. Eva smiled. She remembered how Lloyd had bragged about that account. He thought he'd found the perfect place to hide his money. By evening, things got even more interesting. The bank demanded immediate repayment of the mortgage. The tax office seized all their assets. Clients demanded their money back. Eva watched the events unfold through her informants. Lloyd and Marilyn were renting a cheap motel room on the outskirts of town. It was all they could afford. We have to sell the house, Marilyn insisted. We can still salvage something. Who's going to buy it? You know all the documents are fake. Then find the money. Where are your connections? Where are your friends who promised to help? Their relationship was falling apart. Every day brought new problems, and every problem caused a new argument. "This is all your fault," Lloyd shouted after another court hearing. "Your schemes, your scams. Who asked his wife for money? Who couldn't earn it himself?" Eva received recordings of their conversations. Kevin had installed a wiretap in the motel. With each passing day, the accusations became more vehement and the excuses more pathetic. "You promised to divorce her. You promised we'd live like kings. And you promised you had everything figured out, that your schemes were foolproof." One evening, Marilyn couldn't take it anymore. "You know what? Maybe we should tell your wife the whole truth about whose idea it was to steal her money." "Don't you dare." "Why not? Are you afraid she'll find out how you planned this for months? How you looked for ways to get to her accounts? What about your past scams? You think I don't know about that incident in Boston?" They threw all the dirt at each other, all the secrets they had kept hidden. The love that had seemed so passionate turned into mutual hatred. Marilyn started seeing other men, looking for a new sugar daddy. Lloyd drowned his sorrows in cheap whiskey. "Whore!" he yelled in her face. "Loser!" she replied. "You lived off your wife for 15 years and couldn't even steal properly." The climax came when Marilyn tried to make a deal with Eva behind Lloyd's back. She offered to turn him in exchange for a lighter sentence. "You understand that it's all him," she said on the phone. "I was just a tool." Eva recorded the conversation, and of course, the recording accidentally found its way to Lloyd. Their last meeting ended in a fight. Marilyn screamed that he had ruined her life. Lloyd accused her of betrayal. They parted as enemies, each convinced that the other was to blame for all their troubles. And Eva continued to strike blows. Now that the lovers were at odds with each other, they became even more vulnerable. She filed for divorce. And that was only the beginning of the end. Autumn painted the city in shades of gold and crimson. Leaves slowly fell from the trees, swirling in the cool air, as if heralding the inevitable end. Eva stood at the panoramic window of her office, watching this natural spectacle and thinking about how life sometimes throws up surprising metaphors. The morning began with a message from the bailiff. The decision to confiscate the house had become final. The very house that was supposed to be a nest for a happy life for two traders would now go under the hammer to pay off debts. Lloyd found out while standing in line at the supermarket. His credit card was declined when he tried to buy a bottle of whiskey and a pack of cigarettes. Checking his balance showed zero in all accounts. At that moment, something in his soul broke completely. Security guards escorted him out of the store, screaming, waving his arms, his face contorted with rage. A passerby filmed the whole thing on their phone, and the video instantly went viral on social media. Former construction company manager throws a tantrum in supermarket. Such headlines graced local news sites. Eva watched the video over and over, noting how her husband had changed in recent months. His once impeccable suit now hung loosely on him. The gray hair he had carefully dyed was now visible in silver strands. His eyes showed the desperation of a hunted animal. Old friends turned away one by one. No one wanted to have anything to do with a man embroiled in a financial scandal. Former colleagues crossed the street when they saw him. At the club where he had once been a respected member, his membership card was revoked without explanation. Sensing the approaching collapse, Marilyn made a last desperate attempt to save herself. She turned to her former patron, James Harris, begging for help. But he only laughed at her. "Sweetheart, did you really think I would risk my reputation for someone like you?" Her last jewelry went to the pawn shop. Her designer dresses were sold through a consignment store for next to nothing. The luxurious apartment that Harris had paid for was now out of reach, and she had to move into a tiny studio in a rough neighborhood. Lloyd tried to find work, but his resume was rejected without even being read. His name had become toxic in business circles. Once, he tried to get a job as a clerk at a small company, but the HR director simply showed him an article about the scandal at Premier Estates without saying a word. Eva watched their downfall with the methodical precision of a scientist observing an experiment. Every morning began with reports from her team: new lawsuits, new demands from creditors, new job rejections. The final act played out in the same restaurant, the Blue Oyster, where the lovers had once made plans for their future. Lloyd, quite drunk, tried to explain himself to Marilyn. She pointedly ignored him, flirting with an elderly businessman at the next table. "You loved me!" His cry rang out across the room. "We dreamed of a future together." "Loved?" Marilyn laughed bitterly. "I loved the image of the successful man you pretended to be, but you turned out to be just a pathetic loser living off your wife. And you? Who are you? Just a cheap con artist." Security guards escorted them both out under the disapproving glances of the other patrons. The next day, photos of the scandal appeared in the gossip columns. "A fall from grace," read the headline. Eva watched the scene from her favorite table. She felt neither malice nor pity, only quiet satisfaction at a job well done. As a businesswoman, she knew the value of careful planning and flawless execution. That evening, she received the final report from her private investigator. Lloyd had left town on a bus, heading in an unknown direction. Marilyn had been spotted in a cheap hotel bar, trying to charm an elderly tourist from Texas. Their story was coming to an end. The beautiful house in the suburbs, bought with stolen money, now belonged to the bank. All the accounts were empty, all the doors were locked, all bridges were burned. Eva walked over to the window of her office. The city below went on with its life, indifferent to small tragedies. She took their wedding photo out of the safe, the last memory of 15 years of marriage. Young, happy faces looked at her from the past. "For us," she whispered, raising a glass of wine, "for everything ending exactly as it should have." The autumn wind blew fallen leaves down the street, yellow, red, brown. Nature was preparing for winter, shedding everything superfluous, everything that had lived out its life. Eva understood it better than ever. It was time to start a new chapter in her life. No betrayal, no lies, no illusions. Just her and her business, which had never let her down. Somewhere in the city, two broken people were reaping the fruits of their mistakes, unaware that their downfall had been planned with clockwork precision. Such is the price of betrayal. Such is the price of greed and lies. Eva closed the blinds. The show was over. The curtain had fallen. The audience dispersed and went home. Revenge had been served. It was an unusually clear winter morning. Eva stood on the steps of the courthouse, dazzling in a perfectly tailored white suit. Journalists surrounded her in a tight circle, all eager for comments on the case they had already dubbed the scandal of the year. "Mrs. Turnblad, how would you comment on the court's decision? How do you feel after the divorce proceedings are over?" She smiled calmly and with dignity. "Justice has prevailed. That's all I can say." An hour earlier, the judge had handed down the final verdict. The divorce was granted on her terms. Lloyd didn't get a penny. What's more, he had to pay compensation for the stolen funds. Marilyn did not attend the hearing. She had already left town after the Ethics Commission officially banned her from practicing real estate in the state. She was last seen at the bus station with a single suitcase. Lloyd looked 10 years older. His once expensive suit was wrinkled. His tie was askew. He tried to say something in his defense, but the judge cut him off. "Mr. Turnblad, considering all the circumstances of the case, you should be grateful that it was limited to a civil suit." After the hearing, he tried to talk to Eva. "Listen, we can fix everything." "Fix?" She looked at him as if he were a stranger. 15 years of marriage, trust, respect. How can you fix that? "I loved you." "No, dear, you loved my money. And you know what? Now you have neither." That evening, Eva received a message from her informant. Lloyd had bought a train ticket to Chicago, a new life in a new city where no one knew about his disgrace. She sat in her office, reviewing the final documents. All assets were protected, all accounts were in order, and she held all the strings in her hands. The business had not only survived but had grown. The scandal had attracted additional attention to her boutiques. On the table lay a letter from Marilyn, a pathetic attempt to beg for forgiveness. "I was blinded by greed. I didn't understand what I was doing. I beg for mercy." Eva crumpled the letter and threw it in the trash. Some actions are unforgivable. The news was running a story about the collapse of Premier Estates. Interviews with defrauded clients, expert commentary, archive footage of Marilyn's luxurious lifestyle. Now it all seemed so petty, so insignificant. In the evening, Eva drove to the house that she and her lover had once bought. It had already been sold to new owners, a young family with children. Warm lights were shining in the windows, and children's bicycles were parked on the driveway. She smiled. Everything was in its place. The house had gone to those who would truly create a family there, and the traders got what they deserved. At home, Eva opened a bottle of champagne, the very one she and Lloyd had saved for a special occasion. Well, it was indeed a special moment. "To a new life," she said, raising her glass. Outside, snow was falling, covering the city with a white blanket. Nature was erasing all traces of the past, giving everyone a chance to start with a clean slate. Eva walked over to the mirror. Looking back at her was a beautiful, confident woman, a woman who wasn't afraid to fight for justice, a woman who proved that betrayal always has a price. The story came to an end. The curtain fell. Justice prevailed. And ahead of her lay a whole life, without lies, without betrayal, without compromising her conscience, a life in which she would be the sole mistress of her destiny. Spring in New York was particularly bright. Blooming magnolias adorned the streets, and the sun reflected off the glass facades of skyscrapers. Eva sat in her new office on the 52nd floor, reviewing the latest financial reports. A lot had changed in 2 years. The chain of boutiques had turned into the Eva-style fashion house. Her collections appeared at fashion weeks, and magazines called her the new force in the fashion industry. The story of divorce and revenge that had caused such a stir now seemed like a distant dream. "You have a letter from Chicago," the secretary said, placing an envelope on the table. Eva knew who it was from. Her informants periodically sent her news about Lloyd. He worked as a manager at a small construction company, rented a modest apartment, and drank in cheap bars on weekends, the usual life of an ordinary loser. News about Marilyn came less often. She had last been seen in Las Vegas, working as a hostess in a casino, still trying to catch the American dream. The years had not spared her beauty, and endless scams had left their mark on her eyes, the wary, haunted look of someone who no longer believes even in herself. "Miss Turnblad, your meeting is in 20 minutes, the secretary reminded her. Eva nodded. Today she was meeting with potential investors. Her new project, a chain of boutique hotels, was generating a lot of interest in business circles. James Crawford, a well-known developer, was already waiting for her in the restaurant. He was tall, gray-haired, with attentive gray eyes and impeccable manners. "You look wonderful," he said gallantly, kissing her hand. Over dinner they discussed business, but Eva caught him looking at her with interest. He was a widower. His wife had died in a car accident 5 years ago. Maybe it was time to give a new relationship a chance. Late in the evening, she stood at the panoramic window of her penthouse apartment. The city below sparkled with lights, alive, restless, full of possibilities. Revenge had changed her. It had made her stronger, wiser, more cautious. It had taught her never to take love and loyalty for granted. It had shown her that everyone was capable of betrayal and of revenge. But there was another side to it. Revenge had taught her to appreciate the present, friendship, loyalty, honesty. It taught her to distinguish genuine feelings from fake smiles. It showed her who was truly worthy of her trust. The phone rang on the table. James was inviting her to spend the weekend in the Hamptons. Eva smiled. Maybe it was time to let go of the past, to start a new chapter where there was no room for revenge and bitterness. She went to the bar and took out a bottle of vintage wine, the very same one she had once planned to open on the 15th anniversary of her marriage to Lloyd. "To a new life," she said, raising her glass, "and to the lessons of the past." Revenge had been served, justice had prevailed, but most importantly, she had remained true to herself. She hadn't turned into a monster obsessed with revenge. She hadn't lost her ability to feel, to love, to dream. And somewhere in the city, magnolias were blooming, a symbol of new beginnings. Nature remembers no past grievances. It simply gives us a new spring, new opportunities, new hopes. Eva looked at her reflection in the window. A strong, independent woman who had built an empire on the ruins of betrayal. A woman who knew the price of love and the price of revenge. She had her whole life ahead of her, and this time she would live it by her own rules.